This is Inclusive Design 24 2022. Hello and welcome back, and thank you for joining us. A big thank you to our sponsors, Fable and Intopia, and to our gold sponsors, Barrier Break, TPGI, and UX for the Win. If you use Twitter, you can find us at ID24Conf, C-O-N-F, and the number's 24. And the hashtag we'll be using for this conference is hashtag ID number 4. If you're also watching along on YouTube, you can participate in the live chat if you wish. We'll be monitoring it for questions and comments, so feel free to chime on in. And with all that said, I'm now going to hand it over to my co-host and fellow Eric. Take it away.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome everybody. Last co-host was from Japan, and I'm all the way from the Netherlands, so it's a global hopping all over the place. So great. The next presenter is Linda Keaton, who's going to talk about making the web a more welcome place for minority languages. So, looking forward to this one. So, Linda, take it away.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of the team at ID24 and, of course, the two Erics for the introduction. So today I want to talk about my experience with the web and minority languages. But before I dive into the topic, maybe I'd like to just share a little bit about myself. So I'm Irish. I work as a freelance designer and developer, and I'm born and bred in Dublin, which is the capital city of Ireland, and it's much like any other European city, except probably a little bit smaller than most. But recently, I've been spending more and more of my time in a place called Gweedore. And Gweedore is in the northwest of Ireland, and it is a wild and rugged and windy place, and it's right on the edge of the Atlantic, and it's beautiful. And but it's also a place that is known as a Gaeltacht. And so what a Gaeltacht means, it's a place that has been recognized by our state as a place where Irish is the daily spoken language of the area. So that means that there are a lot of people that will speak Irish in their family, and they'll speak Irish at school. And this is unlike a lot of other areas in Ireland. Ireland was colonized by the British, and with that colonization came the death of our language. English was introduced into the country with new place names, and Ireland only survived on very small remote places, mostly down on the western coast. And these places have been designated as Gaeltacht areas. And I'm lucky enough to live in one of those areas. And so English is my first language. My mother spoke it to me in the cradle. I used English at school, but we learned Irish. Everybody in Ireland learns Irish, and we're trying to reconnect with our native tongue, but to varying degrees of success. Some people are able to learn it and some people don't. But I did learn it in school, and then I had the great fortune to come and live in a Gaeltacht region where I learned how to speak it with really, I'm quite fluent now, I'm pleased to say. Now, 40 years later or 50 years later, but I am fluent enough, I'm able to carry on conversations. However, I rarely write a text in Irish, or if I'm going to tweet, I'll probably do it in English, or an email sends me terrified. I don't want to do it in Irish. So I don't have the literacy skills in the same way, or the confidence that I have in English to write in Irish. So at the start of this year, it's the new year, and I thought, I'll make a New Year's resolution. I have to do something about that. I have to get over this plateau that I'm on at the moment. So I decided, I'm going to try and really, make an effort and improve my literacy skills. And this on about, I think it was the 4th of January, I played my first game of Wordle. And Wordle, I'm a bit of a word puzzle nut. And so I loved Wordle when I first came across it. If you haven't come across it, it's a very simple daily word game. And so I played it, and I think I played it 2 days, and immediately the idea clicked at me. I was like, I'm going to create an Irish language version of this. This will be perfect. We'll introduce a daily practice. I will be practicing my spelling in Irish, and this is coinciding with my New Year's resolution. So with that, I created and released an Irish language version of Wordle, and I called it Focla. And it has just introduced, it has been such an amazing gift for me personally, because not only did I, spend, I have a puzzle to do every day, but it opened up a window, opened up a world. I started talking to people online in Irish. I started seeing how different people were using Irish online. And I started to use my practice as a designer and started to think about how the designs that we're creating, how does that affect people who are using a minority language like Irish online? And this is something that had never occurred to me before that. So before I go any further, I think I'd like to maybe describe what I mean by a minority language. Actually, when I was preparing for this, I was using speech to text, and the speech to text, incidentally, kept mishearing minority language and calling it my naughty language, which tickled me a little bit. But anyway, a minority language, I always thought it would be defined in terms of well, there's less people in Ireland that speak it, so it's a numbers game. But then I came across this fantastic piece of research online. It's entitled "The State of the Internet's Languages Report," and I will share it on Twitter after the talk. But in it, they examine and they look at, it's a very widespread piece of research, and they looked at a huge number of languages online and how people are using different languages online and how multilingual is the internet. And there's it's fascinating reading. But one of the things that really struck me when I read it is that they talked about minority languages, and they talked about some languages, maybe there's Arabic languages that are being used in North Africa that have huge populations speaking these languages, and yet they don't enjoy a lot of the privileges and influence and power that languages that are spoken by fewer people enjoy. So really, I don't think it can be defined so easily in terms of numbers. We need to kind of think about a minority language in relation to a majority language or a dominant language. So if a majority language is a language that enjoys privilege and enjoys access to resources and is used in the halls of power, then a minority language is the opposite of that, or doesn't enjoy those privileges. So then another term I considered using was that I see used a lot is called an endangered language. And this language, I have my reservations about it, because sometimes it makes it sound like the language is just dying out of natural causes. And if history has taught us anything, it's taught us that languages die not through natural causes. They are bloody deaths. They are violent deaths. They happen when there's a transfer of power, when an invader comes and tries to impose their power on the oppressed. So this is not a story that is unique to Ireland. And this is my opportunity to share a few of my holiday snaps. But literally everywhere I go on holidays, it seems that I find the same story repeated over and over again. Like I went to, where was I? In Sweden, in the north of Sweden, in the Arctic Circle, where I met Sami, and they have the similar story. When I was in South America, there's a lot of Indigenous people there who have a struggle ongoing for their Indigenous language. And then, of course, there's obligatory picture of my dog Molly when we were in the Pyrenees in a place called Catalonia and Val d'Aran. So this place is really linguistically rich. There is and they're fighting for their rights to be able to use and speak Catalan, first of all, and in that valley in particular, there's also another language called Aranese. So with that, I started to, I suppose, ask what is the experience that we have as minority language users online. So when I started to use Irish, like say if I type in a question in Google and ask it in Irish, will the results be returned to me in Irish or will they come back in English? Is it easy for me to type in Irish? Like what happens when I want to make a special character, like an accent? We call the accents Sheena Fathers in Irish. I think for the most part, when you speak to people, they talk about how amazing the internet has been for reviving communities, and particular minority language communities online. There is a website called indigenous-tweets.com, which has been created by Professor Kevin Scannell, who is a mathematician and a computer scientist in the University of St. Louis, I think. And he has done a lot of work tracking Irish online. And in this is a visualization on the screen of all the tweets. And I think it was in 2013 when he produced this visualization, but it's all the tweets, all the conversations that were happening in Irish on Twitter. And you can see how, okay, yes, people struggle with languages online in some respects, but they also break down barriers. And you can see here that there's conversations happening transatlantically. There's people talking with people down in South America, as far over as Finland and the west and east coast of America. So this is like really amazing, and it's revitalizing and breaking down barriers for people who want to use their minority languages online. In my own experience with Focla, the Wordle game, so far this year, I can see that it has been played in over 140 countries worldwide. So Irish is out there and people are using it, and they're using it online. So it is my belief, though, that yes, minority languages are thriving online, but they're thriving because the people are like adaptable and because we're resourceful and creative, and they're thriving in spite of the technology. So why do I say that? I'll go back to that piece of research that I found online called the Internet Languages, and in that there was one piece of data that they showed, which shows that 3/4 of internet users online are from the global south. So that means that they're from places like Asia, South Asia, and Africa and the Middle East. So you would think that 3/4 of the content would be created, or they're making 3/4 of the apps they control. But shockingly, but not surprisingly, I suppose, when you look at who's actually creating the knowledge, who's creating the data, who's creating the services that are being used online. And you'll find that like they did an examination of Wikipedia edits and where GitHub accounts were being made, and they found that the vast majority of these were coming from the global north, places like North America, places like Europe. So for me, I think it's quite worrying that the global south are using the internet, which is great that they have access, but they're using it as consumers and not as creators. And we have to think, why? Why is that happening? What difficulties, what barriers are they encountering that is stopping them from participating as a creator on the internet? So I started asking myself, I went back to my own questions. I go, well, do you know what? Maybe I wasn't just such a rubbish student all those years. Like maybe the reason when I wasn't texting in Irish is not just because I'm not really good at spelling in Irish. Maybe the reason I didn't text is because it's hard. And it's not because the spelling in itself is hard. It's hard because the technology makes it hard for me. Up until very recently, I didn't know I could use my keyboard in Irish. So every time I typed in Irish, I get those big red dots and it was telling me my spelling was wrong, even when it was right. We all have that experience in English when we try to type the F word and it becomes stuck. It's kind of funny, but imagine that happens persistently. It's always happening. You're always fighting with the technology, which is always imposing upon you English, and you're trying to write in your minority language. What ends up happening is that we just give up. We just switch to the dominant language. We're just coerced into using it because the technologies are pushing us down into that direction to do that. So why does this matter? If by definition, pretty much all minority language speakers are bilingual and they can speak English. So, they're not being excluded, right? I think they are being excluded, and I think it's a worry. We should all be concerned if the internet becomes a monolingual environment. I think it's in all of our interests if the internet is able to support huge diversity of languages and huge diversity of different cultures. And we need this diversity online. Also, if we consider about what's happening in AI at the moment, technology is becoming more and more embedded in our homes. We've seen particularly in COVID how a lot of telemedicine took off, and if this is voice activated, maybe I won't be able to access the services in the languages of my choice in the future. So this is a worry. So we need to arrest this trend, which is pushing us into a monolingual internet. So also, this technology is not neutral. When we build and design in English, we are embedding into our designs the attitudes of English. And sometimes they are at the expense and exclude cultures that maybe aren't English based. So if we accept this to be true, how do we kind of decolonize the internet, I suppose? And I don't have the answers. I don't have any kind of quick fix. And I definitely am not able to, talk to big tech and say that, Irish has a huge market share. I definitely am not able to, I don't have the ear of some politician with deep pockets, and I'm able to persuade him to invest in research for minority language technology development. So I need to come up with some other sort of strategy. And what I have decided to do is just in my own work, I just want to, I suppose, interrogate all the assumptions that I make when I'm designing an interface or when I'm designing a feature or when I'm making choices. So to start that, what I've been doing over the last few months, I suppose, is just kind of looking and kind of everything that I use, and I'm doing this in a very ad hoc way, and there is no rigor to this research at all. But these are just my observations, I suppose, that I have encountered over the last few months. Once I started asking myself this question about how does Irish fit with technology, and I want to share my observations with you. Be they, I have no real recommendations to make to you. They're just observations. So I suppose the first thing that we do when we try to interact with any service online, we have to identify ourselves, and that should be pretty easy. So on the screen, I have a picture of an Irish singer. She's an Irish Zambian singer, and her name is Denise Chaila. And the first time I came across her, she had this song called "Say My Name," and she's telling people her name is not to be mispronounced. And I can only imagine what it must have been like for Denise growing up in Limerick, a small city in Ireland where she was Black and she didn't have a surname that is Murphy, and how that must have caused difficulties. But she is unapologetic, and she wrote this song saying, "Say my name and respect it." And it makes me think about when we ask people their names online, when we're creating forms for them to fill out, are we respecting how they pronounce their name? Are we telling them that their names are invalid? Are we accepting, are we forcing them to use like only A to Z? Or are we allowing them to have special characters in their names? Are we telling them that like their names are too short? I can only imagine what would have happened if Q from James Bond was trying to buy some parts online and suddenly the computer says, no, your name is too short. Names can't be too short. We should stop telling people that their names are too short. This is a cultural bias that we're imposing on people. Fields also need to be long enough for people's names. You know, if your name isn't Smith, some people have long names, some people have gaps in their names, some people don't have surnames at all. Maybe we should consider just why does it have to be first and last name? Is that assumption rooted in a British or an English culture, or is if we just make one field, would that be more culturally inclusive? And I think it's important as well that we should let the user know where this input is going to be used. So for a lot of different cultures will have names that are official names, and maybe they have names that are local names, and maybe they want to have the opportunity to choose which name they're going to use in this context, and it's important that they know where this input will be used. So once we've accepted the name, the next thing we need to do is make sure that we display it correctly. So this on the screen is an example of, this was a COVID certificate, a travel certificate for those outside of the EU. Maybe you didn't have this during COVID, but in the EU, we needed to have a COVID certificate to be able to travel during the height of the pandemic. So this was a brand new system that was created, and people needed to register and kind of prove that they were vaccinated, et cetera, et cetera. So but what happened was that people that registered with Irish names that had fathers in them, when they got their certificates back, those they weren't displaying their name correctly. And this is not only disrespectful, but it's also problematic if you consider when they turn up at the airport and their name doesn't match their ticket that the airline has, who won't accept fathers, this is also happens, doesn't match their passport. So we need to be respectful of people. People's names have different characters, and they can have numbers, and they can have symbols. So we need to decolonize our idea of what a name should look like and trust a user to know how to spell their own name. Similarly with addresses, so we're taught as UX designers that we need to create, you know, frictionless experiences for people when they're filling out forms. People don't like filling out forms, so we want to make it a little bit easier for them. So sometimes we will see, for example, you'll see a postcode picker, and it would auto complete what the user address is. But the thing is, places that have been colonized often have had their names changed, and those names, the new names are given are the colonizers' names, and the local people might not accept them as being their real name. So maybe the colonizer leaves, or people reclaim the original name, but sometimes the systems that were built, and they can last for hundreds of years, will still use the old colonial name. So we need to give people a choice to be able to reject those names. A person should be able to say where they live without being told that that place doesn't exist. So on another subject of, I suppose, old colonial reminders, I'm speaking English now. English is my first language. I love English. I have fun. I have friends in English. I read mostly in English. But every time I come to a UI where I'm selecting my language, and I feel that English is my language, and I have to select a Union Jack. The Union Jack represents a different country. It's not my identity. So when I have to select the Union Jack, even though I don't identify, it hurts a little. So I think we need to remove that. Flags are not equal to languages and vice versa. We shouldn't equate the two together. I don't know if you've heard the band Fontaines DC. They're one of my favorite bands at the moment. They're Irish, they're deadly, and they have a song called Roman Holiday. And one of the lyrics in that song is, it says, "I don't want to see the Queen, I already sing her song." And I always think of that when I have to press those Union Jack. So this isn't I don't want this to be like a Brit bashing session. It isn't that at all. This is an example of a site that was created by Irish people, the Irish government. In fact, it was created by the Department of Tourism, and it's a site advertising Ireland. And I was one day, I don't know why I was on it, having a look around, and suddenly I discover that they have detected that they decided that I'm in Great Britain, and that I should go to the Great Britain site, and they have presented me with a Union Jack as well. I was a little bit horrified, so I wrote to them several times and I asked them to change it. And so they have changed it. So I feel a little bit mean for including this in this talk, but it is just an example that we're all capable of making these assumptions and making, I suppose, culturally insensitive websites. And we should really interrogate it a little bit more. So I've kind of digressed a little bit. Let me go back. We were trying to address the question of whether people are able to create the content in their own languages online. And I have a question, and I don't know what the answer is, but maybe people are creating more content than we know that they're creating, but maybe the content that is being created is not being tagged correctly, so it's going unrecorded. So one example I've come across myself is in content management systems. As far as I can see, they all work the same way. So when I was looking at, say, WordPress, I came across this astonishing statistic the other day that WordPress has, I think they create 40% of all websites on the internet. And somebody can tell me I'm totally wrong there, but I read that and my mind is kind of blown. So the thing about WordPress is translation ready. So you can, I can translate that framework to Irish if I want to, if I have the time, inclination, and expertise. But up until now, it isn't available in Irish. So people, when they're creating websites using the WordPress platform and they're creating websites in Irish, they will use the framework in English, but they will output Irish content in their web pages. And they're probably completely oblivious that in the background, because they've used it as an English framework, that each of those pages have been tagged with the language attribute of English. And the only way for them to change that is either to, one, go in and change the header.php, which would need some amount of technical expertise, or to introduce some sort of third-party plugin or translation plugin, which would change the language attribute. So there's no easy way for a non-technical person to change the language attribute associated. And one can only assume that this is happening given the huge amount of sites that are being created by WordPress, that there's a huge volume of websites out there with the incorrect language tag associated with them. I see the same thing happening as well with subtitles on videos. So when YouTube is creating, when you're uploading an SRT file to YouTube, you're asked to specify what the language is, and it gives you a drop down of languages. So if your language is not there in the drop down, then tough, you're out of luck. You might be creating beautiful content, you might have a gorgeous set of subtitles to go with it, but if you're not within, if the system doesn't recognize your language, then you're out of luck. You can't, it can't acknowledge it. I tried it on Twitter. So on Twitter, it's kind of slightly different. It is when you upload a subtitle file to with your video on Twitter, if you're using, if the user interface language of your Twitter app is in English, then it automatically assumes that your subtitle file is in English as well. So if I want to label my subtitle file as being in Irish, I need to go in and I need to change the subtitle, or the user interface of my Twitter app to Irish, and then it will make the assumption that the subtitle file is in Irish. It's a very clunky way of doing it, and it's probably unrealistic. People won't do that. And we know already that particularly minority languages, they switch between languages. So it's unrealistic to have this tight coupling between the user interface language and the language of the output. We see the same. I tried it on Facebook, and there's similar kind of hoops that people have to jump through, although admittedly it's somewhat easier. So this is a quote from the from that report that I mentioned earlier, and it says, and it really struck a chord at me, and it made me feel quite sad. It says, it seems to us that these platforms in general perpetuate the colonialist idea that there are languages with greater value and capacity to communicate. So assuming, say, that we can tag our content in the way that we want to tag it, and then we go and look for it, and we want to search for content in our minority language and connect with people in that language. How easy is that? So I help my partner. We publish a Irish language podcast, and one of the things when we were selecting the RSS feed, who was going to syndicate the RSS feed, I searched and I wanted to make absolutely sure that we were able to tag the RSS feed correctly with the right language attribute. So I know that the feed out there has the data. I know it is tagged as Irish, and yet when I went to Spotify, I checked that first, and I was like, okay, right, how do I search for Irish language podcasts? It's like, oh, I can't. Really, the only way I can do it, and again, we're seeing this, I see this pattern repeated over and over and over again, but the only way that we can, that designers think that we can specify which language will appear in the suggestions, the algorithm will work, is by changing either our regional location or changing the language of the UI. So they're tightly coupling what is presented to us to the language of the UI, the language of the US, or the location with the IP address, all of which is going to really disadvantage minority languages, because we don't work like that. Minority languages mightn't have access to a UI in their language. So I saw, actually, when I was on Spotify, there's loads of people out there. So actually, if you come across any of the questions, give them an upvote, because there's questions out there, people requesting this feature. They want to be able to filter by language. And not only that, I checked out their API, and so their API endpoint for, I think it was, oh God, I can't remember. I think it's episodes, and then there's another one, which I'm taking it as podcasts, and then there's another endpoint for audiobooks, I think. And both of them are filterable by language. So the data is there and they have the support. So I don't understand why we're not passing that on in the UI and making it easier for people to search by language. So I checked out a few other providers and we see the same thing, say in Castbox. Then I started to ask about, well, music, surely I know for a fact, because I have created MP3 files and I have tagged them with the language attribute, and yet there's no way for me to search by language on, for example, Apple Music. And then are we able to search for our books? And this was on, now I haven't done much research into this, but I was just talking to someone the other day and they said, you know what, the ISBN, which is an international book tagging system, and it puts all the barcodes on all the books, and kind of without an ISBN number, your kind of book doesn't exist in the world. And so, but apparently the agency that governs the ISBN in Ireland and England, it doesn't support special characters. And it actually answered a question, because I remember kind of looking at certain bookstores, like maybe like Waterstones, and I was looking at their website and I was going, Jesus Christ, like why aren't they displaying the special characters? And it suddenly clicks, oh, well, maybe the system that is driving this is not supporting special characters. So I'm pretty close to running out of time, and I'm sorry if I rambled a lot, and I've got loads more I'd love to talk about, but I suppose to summarize, users know how to spell their own name, and they know where they live, so we should trust them as designers. We should let people to describe their own content, and we should let users find their own content as well. Yes, I think that is my last slide. If anybody has any questions for me, I would love to hear them.
So thank you, Linda. It
Thank
was
you.
a great talk. And as coming from one of the countries that doesn't exactly have a majority language, as the Netherlands,
Yeah.
I totally can relate with what you're saying. And there, of course, there are questions. So let me bring up the first one. It's really interesting, from Trina from UX for the Win. We've run into challenges at work with how to validate names and addresses for data integrity, but the diversity of names and addresses make this a huge challenge. Do you have any suggestions?
First of all, I suppose I'd ask, why are you validating for data integrity? What are you trying to protect? And I suppose the next kind of practical thing I would say is, rather than a hard computer says no, and red, your name is invalid, maybe there's a way that we can help users not make mistakes, but maybe we can allow them to input, but we'll just do a double check. It's like, are you sure? Is there any chance that you might have spelled this incorrectly? And if they go, no, I've spelled that right, then trust them. Like that would be my feeling of how we should deal with that.
Okay, thanks for that. Another one, what's a simple thing someone can do to begin their decolonization journey?
To begin?
Their decolonization journey.
Oh, I suppose we just need to ask questions of ourselves, like pick apart everything. I'll give one example. When I was working on a large application a few years ago, and it was a total mess, I'm not going to lie, and it had passed through many different hands, and the styling was all over the place, and there was no consistency. And I thought, you know, I was like, well, I'm going to just normalize all the titles of each thing, and you know, that'll introduce some consistency. So it came from a good place, but then eventually we ended up getting some really excellent translators on the job, and they were going through all of the text that was written on all of the interfaces, and oh my god, I broke their heart because they were trying to use their orthography, and then it was like my CSS was like text transform, you know, and I was completely undoing their work, and their heart was broken. And it was a very humbling experience for me, because I realized, you know what, I thought I was right. I thought, yes, we use title case, that's an English convention, but it wasn't the convention in their culture, and it was wrong in their culture. And I was wrong to impose it with this simple one line of CSS. So I think we should just question particularly where our conventions have come from.
Yeah, we take a lot for granted.
We do.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I understand as well, because in my home I have some home automation, and try to make Google understand that I want to turn off the lights or switch them on again. That doesn't go as smoothly with my Dutch accent.
Yeah. I'd say it's worse for the Scottish people. They have a really hard time.
Yeah, they can never turn on or off their lights.
Yeah.
I don't see any questions popping in. Maybe on YouTube, some additional ones. No, on Twitter. No. That was it. So,
Oh my God.
thank you very much for a very enlightening talk.
I raced through it. I didn't need to race through it so fast now. But yeah, I'd really like to thank you all for this opportunity for including this talk. And I can't wait for it to be over so I can enjoy the rest of the talks today. I haven't seen any yet. So
I have lots of fun with the following talks. It will still go on a few hours.
Okay, yeah, enjoy. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Linda, thank you so much for such a powerful and compelling talk. Just a lot of really good takeaways for me personally. I will never find the tweet, but it reminds me of somebody who had a diacritic in their name, who entered it into a shipping label that was then like routed globally, and they documented each step of the way, and each system would parse it. And by the time it arrived, like their entire name was just complete like garbledy-gook gibberish, and it's like completely undecipherable. And so like your talk kind of reminded me of that, and just reminded me of all the you know, English-centric biases that are inherent in our systems, and how that really needs to change.
Oh, that tweet sounds like it needs to be animated.
Yeah.
Great little film.
Yeah. So thank you again. And for everyone watching, if you enjoyed this talk, you can show your appreciation by hitting that like button on YouTube. You can also use the subscribe button to get updates for future ID24 content. And a reminder that Inclusive Design 24 is a welcoming community. You can find a link to our code of conduct on the footer of every page of our website, which is inclusivedesign24.org. And Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you by the following sponsors: Fable, Intopia, Barrier Break, TPGI, UX for the Win, Equal Entry, InfoAxia, Intuit, the Law Office of Laney Feingold, Adrian Roselli LLC, and WebAble. Because of their generosity, we're able to bring you this conference for free. So just thanks again for their donations and their investment in an accessible and inclusive conference. We'll be back on the top of the hour for our next session. And just thank you again, Linda, and to Eric for this lovely talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.